Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. In today's episode, we're going to continue on with our exploration of this book here, Franz Bardon's Initiation into Hermetics, as a spiritual path and a means of progress. So in today's video, we're going to look at step 2 of this book. Now, in step 1, the theme, more or less, of that step is self-awareness and choice, right? All of the exercises involved have to do with specifying the pathway and activity of the mind, as well as cultivating deep awareness at all layers, and working from the physical standpoint on the health and function of breathing and nourishment. So essentially how we nourish ourselves, and even in that step still cultivating choice and freedom from our habits in terms of actually focusing on our consumption, etc. So in step 2, we begin with what he terms autosuggestion. This is essentially self-hypnosis, and using self-hypnosis to facilitate our growth on this path, or our ease and well-being in life. Now, when it comes to hypnosis, one of the key things that you look for in hypnosis is the alleviation of the habitual identity from the subconscious. So we're essentially taking away the immediate spark of awareness of this moment to go a little bit deeper into the subconscious. So a lot of the autosuggestion, self-hypnosis, has to do with working with the subconscious and uncovering the subconscious. Now, most of the black and white mirror work that we do, most of the parts of our life that are good or not good, arise out of the subconscious and out of these deep functioning habits of energy, these habitual perceptual reactions in relation to environment, self, and energy, habitual reactions, perspectives, perceptions of mind. So we really need to dive into this stuff through moment-by-moment awareness to uncover that. And then through the self-hypnosis, we can make changes, okay? So this all rides on being able to access the subconscious. And at this stage in this particular text, the skills are not deep enough when it comes to the meditative capacities to do this anytime. So the advice given is to use the moments before sleep and the moments when we wake up to facilitate easier access to the subconscious. Okay. A modern writer who's done a lot of really good work on this is Bruce Lipton. He wrote a book a couple decades ago called The Biology of Belief, and I believe there was a follow-up book maybe 10 years later, and he's done a bunch of other explorations on this, on how the depths of your subconscious beliefs influence how your life manifests back to you. So in Hermetics, there's this saying, as within, as all about, or as above, so below, as within, as all about. So this is really worth exploring. Now, when we start looking at these explorations, he, in this book, Bardon, looks at having a string of beads, maybe 30 or 40 beads. Also, you could, if you don't want to buy beads, just tie knots in a string. And you can use this to make sure that you run through whatever wish or desired outcome you might want with this self-hypnosis. So you could look at this as setting intentions for sleep and setting intentions for the day from the layer of the subconscious. Now, when we look at this, we need to break away from the use of negatives. Okay, so let's say you have addictive tendencies. that you want to move away from in your normal life, you want to, of course, we all know now, instead of using phrases like I don't engage in this habit, I don't smoke, I don't this, I don't that, I don't get angry, I don't judge people, whatever it is that you're wanting to look at. If you use the negative, it's known well enough these days that the mind tends to not register the negative, which means that you're essentially saying to yourself, I smoke, I judge people, I this, I that, I the other. So the suggestion here is to use identity phrases where you identify with the thing that you're doing. Now, oddly enough, the author here writes that, instead of saying I don't smoke, say I am a non-smoker. So he's using the positive of the identity, I am, but then still implying the non-doing of the addiction, which might work for some people, but I think it's probably pretty counterproductive. This is where I find there is a lot of value in identifying with the freedom. So, you could say, like, I am sober, instead of I am a non-alcoholic. You might say, I am sober. Now, with these types of approaches, there's still a whole identity that gets involved with what it means to be sober, and a whole identity involved in this fight for sobriety that a lot of people go through. So whatever the addiction is, So what I like to employ here is the inclusion of freedom, right? I am free of whatever this habit might be. I am free of anger and capable of contentment. I am free from judging the judgment of others, right? That could be coming in at you, which means also going out. I am free from judging others or being judged by. I am free from this judgment, and filled with contentment. Instead of I don't judge people, I see the best in others. Things like this. You start to build into the identity the qualities that you want. So I find the inclusion of freedom can be very important here, because it allows us the latitude to change. I am free to see the best in others. I am free to engage in social interactions under the joy of my own cognizance and will. A little different than I don't drink, right? Or I am a non-drinker. So part of this too, as you're working these into your subconscious, is to see the future potentials in which you would be acting out this habit. So as you are working through we might call the mantra of these particular desired outcomes, you also see the situations in which that is happening. Now, instead of seeing it as the future situations, one of the best pieces of advice I heard for this kind of stuff, to sort of cement it into the subconscious much more easily, is to see it as if it's already happened, right? This is already a part of us. So you can, of course, future pace it, but also past pace it. And this can be done through internally going, I remember that time when I engaged in this activity, as if it was something that already happened, in this positive and free way. So this is a really fun tool. You can even do it with a friend. Hey, remember that time when we blah, 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 as if it already happened. And then also allow for that potential to tendril out into the future, and permeate through the present. So essentially the manifestation of the desired future identity as given to the past and then perceived in the present this has a lot of potential in it. So this is a little bit different from what Franz Bardon offers, which is very specific identification now with the desired future. I'm also opening up the possibility here of identifying the past with the future, with the present. So this gives us a little bit more latitude when it comes to ingraining this into our beliefs of who and what we are now, because who and what we are now tends to be an amalgamation of the past. So change the past to change the present to facilitate freedom of the future. So that is autosuggestion, and this is it's part of the mental training. It's also essentially a big part of the astral training, or the cultivation of qualities and habits of the soul, etc. When you're going through this work. Once again, the reason to do it before and after sleep is because this is the natural place in our daily rhythms where essentially the mental matrix, the substance which connects the soul and the mind, and the sort of the conscious waking mind a lot as well. This is where that starts to soften, and so the mental body, the mental mind, starts to break free of the subconscious and of the astral elements of the soul. Because this breaks free, it softens out, it allows for these changes to take place, because the protective Qi, we could say, of the identity, which is very often seen through the lens of the mind, it is at this point no longer protecting all of those subconscious emotional habits and holding them in place with its tyrannical fist. So it's an easy in. Now, of course, as skills develop on the meditative front, and we develop access to more refined frequencies, especially where the mind truly has to break free, and we develop a type of control of the mind's connection into and cohesion with the soul, and then when it breaks free of it, from a meditative standpoint, this is a necessity to all higher levels of meditation. And this is why, as you progress on this path, you will find that every time you meditate, you are different. Every time you engage in deep practice, you come back different. So using when we sleep, the moments before sleep, the moments when we wake up, to really engage in this process is a doorway in the beginning to allow us to touch into what will become very choiceful at any point of day or night once the skills have been developed, and once the quality of perspective when it comes to not being so attached to who and what we think we are has really been ingrained through tangible expression through practice. Okay, so that's the first portion of this book. Moving on, we have further training of the essentially the mind, the mental training here. Now, in step 2, when it comes to the mental training, a lot of this is based off of focus, right? The one-pointed concentration. And this is in relation to each of the sense gates. So the examples given are to take everyday household objects, for the visual gate at least, and to take some time and try to visualize each one with as minimal interruptions as possible. He suggests here that when you're doing this mental training, you use the string of beads. It could be a mallet bead necklace, or the same, beads that you use for your autosuggestion, your self-hypnosis. And every time you have a disruption, you shift up a bead, so you know at the end of the session how many disruptions you've had. I found that this was it was deleterious to the actual progress for me. I found that some people have very easy movement of the beads. I find it to be far more disruptive. So this is where it can be helpful to apply before you start this a mindset of, this is the most important thing I'm going to do. This is the most important thing right now. And to actually build into your habits here a choice of this is the most important thing right now. Nothing else matters right now. And the more deeply we can resonate with this particular activity and this mindset, it'll allow the activity to be much more easily focused on fully and completely. Okay, if you look at this as just simple exercises to train your imagination, it can kind of detract from the potential and from the potency of your ability to really tune in and stay focused. So this is where the objects that we focus on, I think they can matter, right? Yes, you want to be able to call to mind with absolute detail and clarity anything, but it's a lot easier to focus on things that are important to us instead of trying to focus on things that are unimportant to us. This sort of builds failure pretty easily. So far easier to have success with these exercises if what it is that we're going to focus on is something we already want to focus on. It makes it a lot easier. There's a whole bunch more of us that's involved and backing our potential for success here. So when we're doing the visual exercises, things like a tree or a leaf or a cactus, if you like nature stuff, these can be very interesting to explore. If you're into botany, looking at and memorizing it, all the plant details, the leaf details, how the leaves branch off the stems, whether it's opposite or opposing, the ways in which the leaves might be, jagged or straight, the quality, the texture, all of this stuff, the sheen, the way the light shines off it. This can all be part of your visualization. So you choose something, you visualize it, and you hold that in your attention and your awareness, and you try to sustain your focus on the object of your visualization for as long as possible. Really see it in all of its detail. And we want to be able to hold this, turn that object around, see it three-dimensionally, even four-dimensionally as time passes through it. Again, if it's a leaf, maybe you see it as it comes into existence, as it buds out. You see it as it decays. This can all be a part of the visualization. And then in this step for the mental training, we apply this to all of the sense gates, right? You apply it to the sound gate, you apply it to the feeling gate, you apply it to the nose gate of sense of smell, you apply it to taste. And each of these you do in isolation so that you can really become familiar with what it means to hear something fully and completely, what it means to smell something, one thing, say a spice, for example. What does cinnamon smell like, right? What is the fragrance of, say, eucalyptus, fully and completely? You can use the actual object, say like pour some eucalyptus oil. What does that smell like in reality? And then remove yourself from the presence of that smell and see if you can bring it back, right? This is best done in two different locations and with a time separation so that the actual contact of the substance against the whatever smells, the olfactory senses there, actually have a time to subside so you can actually find the sensory object apart from its presence in front of you. Of course, with the visual, you can just close your eyes and then you've blotted out that sensation. When it comes to the smell, the chemicals contact is residual. And we want to be aware of that. Same with taste. So be aware of this, right? And make sure that you're being as honest as possible with yourself when it comes to your ability to draw the full detail and magnitude of the sensory experience back in with just the qualities of remembering or visualizing. Now, this is where we get into two poles of spiritual practicers. the ones to whom anything that you imagine is increasing your cultivation of delusion. This would be the sort of militant Buddhistic type practitioners, often fall into this category. And then the magical practitioners, in which you are working towards manifestation of and using spiritual skills, application of spiritual skills in life. So this practice of visualization, or in the tracker tradition that I did briefly many years ago, they called it envisioning. And this is where you try to really imagine or envision all of the sense gates, what they would be experiencing with as pure and powerful a potential as possible, as if it is real right now. Every sense gate is bringing in information as if it is what was happening now. So there's lots of value in this from both sides, actually. So from the side, of course, of manifestation, the more real you can make the sensory experience. And in this step, we're doing just one sense at a time so that you can really understand that sense. This creates essentially the shape within the mind and the shape within the feeling, the sensory apparatus, the shape within the body, and astrally of what that thing that you want is. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? And you can start to bring that reality into the present, and you can start allowing the scope of that reality to reform the mind, to reform the astral relationships, and to reform the physical, internal chemistry that's working its way through you. So there's a lot of value in this. Now, even if your paradigm of the spiritual world and workings and path is to surrender and relinquish any shapes and forms that the mind might be touching and creating, there's still a lot of value in practicing the creative process, because it helps us own the creative process. And if we own the entirety of the creative process of an image forming moment by moment, again, this is back to step one mental training, if we alter it, the arising and cessation of thoughts, watching the thoughts. Watching the thought of any visual stimulus, any auditory stimulus that might arise from within, any of all the other senses, you get it. So if we own the creative process, that means we are more familiar with each moment of that creative process for that particular sense gate, which means we can own more fully and completely the destructive or surrender process of those sensory experiences coming up, arising internally. This also starts to give us an indication as to the connection between within and without. When that sensory stimulus is arising from without, it gives us control over, an agency over both the creative and destructive processes of external sensory input as well. So we start to understand the connection between internal sensory creation and external sensory creation, and how those can both be one. Which brings us back, of course, to the subconscious interplay and the self-hypnosis. So this is the step 2 mental training, which is based around owning the creative, and I will add here the destructive capacity within each of the sense gate faculties, within our ability to focus purely and completely on one sense gate, on one image, for example, and how it arises and how it falls away. Each stage and layer of that process. Now, you do this in the beginning, of course, say like looking at it and then closing your eyes and trying to draw it back. And over time, we want to be able to have the eyes open, to be in the presence of external sensory stimulus and still see that object in front of us as if it were really there. right? Of any of the senses, to hear, to be amongst auditory, sensory stimulus, and then choose, say, the sound of a bell or whatever that we want to focus on, the sound of a waterfall, whatever we might want to draw into this moment, right? And there is value in this, once again, for the release on everything type of mentality as well. So this brings us into what we choose to focus on. And we could say that, yeah, you could focus on anything. A mundane object is just as productive as a different type of object. However, there does seem to be a difference between what we get out of the objects that we focus on, the value in them, right? So this is where, if you're going to choose a visual object, maybe some type of mandala, a very simple one to begin, or maybe one of the Platonic solids is very valuable, right? Maybe a chemical compound, maybe it's whatever it might be, carbon or oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, the four basics that might link over to the Platonic solids as well. You could explore this as well. Simple, right? And also quite profound. Sacred objects can have, I found, a lot more value than mundane objects, because there's a natural sacredness to your relationship with it. Unless you're at a point in which everything that you see sacredness in. Everything that you hear sacredness in. And this is another evolution of the sensory experience. The recognition of the sacredness of duality itself, of sensory experience itself, and of the underlying stillness and emptiness within, the underlying light within. This is, of course, as the growth keeps percolating and spinning, spiraling upwards. Okay, so lots to explore here. I'm just giving you an overview, and also different ways to explore things that aren't only confined to the parameters of this particular book. This comes from your own exploration, and the freedom with which we explore these things makes a really big difference. If we explore this stuff in a very narrow-minded, confined way, the energy that we build will facilitate the narrowing of our own mind and of our own perspective. And this is something we want to be cognizant of and keep moving towards freedom, keep moving towards union with more refined alchemy, right? Through the sovereignty, the freedom of the process. Okay, let's move on here to in step 2, the schooling of the astral form, the emotions of soul. Here we have looking at the soul, essentially. So the elements and the personality factors as they play through passions or habits of emotion that we might tend to run away with just subconsciously, right? So, okay. In the first step, when we looked at this, we looked at the different positive and negative attributes of our personality, and we sort of broke them into the elements. And this particular phase is designed to help us change that, right? And this can be done through, of course, the self-hypnosis. It can be done through more wakeful self-hypnosis, in the sense of focusing on our positive attributes, right? Which might seem in contrast to the ruthlessness that was encouraged by this author in the first step. But what we focus on, what we touch with our attention, grows. So if we place our attention onto the positive attributes, or the positive version of those attributes, right? To every negative, there's a positive. Then we can build and grow that through focusing our energy there. And this is a tactic used in a lot of spiritual traditions, where you place your awareness on, say, the precepts in Buddhism. You might place it on what you do want. And because you're focusing here all the time, you end up starving the negative attributes of energy, and those start to secede over time. So there can be a lot of value in this. Sometimes, however, through this method, we don't take care of the moment-by-moment causes that facilitate, and perspectives that facilitate the arising of the negative attribute. So there's also here as well mentioned a third way in which we can work on this, which is through sheer moment-by-moment awareness and then willpower. As soon as you start to notice one of the negative attributes of the elements arising, then you, according to Bardon, would sever it in that moment, crush it down. Is there value to this? Yes, because once again, we aren't feeding it with our attention, but it can also hide the full healing and dissolution of that negative tendency. So another way to do this is through moment-by-moment awareness. You observe the arising of that particular negative tendency. If you've developed the capacity to feel and differentiate the elements from the energetic perspective, then you can just tweak it, right? You can tweak this through working its pole element, or just observe the form that it's taking, right? And dissolve that container into that element, and that allows for easy transmutation of that tendency from the negative into the positive. So this is again why I'm not a huge fan of the intellectual first approach when it comes to this stuff, because at this point we're still trying to use the intellect to work with the energy, which works fine, or definitely a lot more effectively if you have access and awareness of the energy itself. So the method I encourage for folks that seems to be more effective is to actually build your relationship with the energy, with your awareness of the energy. Then instead of observing the reflections further down the road of the stimulus and response when it comes to the emotions, you can observe the energy itself before it has meaning. There's all these fluctuations, and you can observe as that energy starts to crystallize into the meaning of the particular emotion and the resulting thoughts and perceptions and perspectives, etc. You can start working and altering things from the energy itself. And as your awareness moment by moment improves, the cascade of events that has to take place before we notice what's going on and notice the changes, it doesn't have to cascade as much. We can surrender and work with the energy far closer to the moment of stimulus, right? The moments of consecutive perception and the resulting cascade of meaning that we give to that stimulus, right? And this can be done far, far closer to the point where there's almost nothing that happens. We can maintain equilibrium and harmony through moment-by-moment surrender. And of course, this brings us back to the mental training of this step 2, which is being aware of all the sensory input. What are the images that come to mind moment by moment? What are the sounds? What are the feelings? What are of course, the tastes, the smells, and there's a thing here too, the memories, right? Memory has all this stuff in it. So we can become aware of all this stuff and really start working with it at a number of different levels to facilitate the fastest harmonization of the emotional bodies and this astral work, the black and white mirror of the soul. You can work in everything from step 1 in terms of how you eat, how you drink water, how you use your moments of your day to be in a constant process of facilitating an easy type of change, right? There's a lot in the Bardon traditions and this more magical approach of this very willful, rigid mind. And you can do a lot of work in that way. However, it seems that it is very limited and that far greater work can be surrendered to on the other side of that. If you need to employ the very rigid will for a period of time to work your way out of some bad habits, go for it. However, it does seem to hold everybody back at a certain point. We have to move beyond that. The same focus can exist from a different place and a different mentality. Okay, so that is the step 2 of the working with the emotions and working with our personality, our character, is to look through and use these 3 different ways to start exploring them and altering them so that you can find a positive equilibrium, which is very, very important for further work, because all of our negative personality traits and all of our positive personality traits will both be pressurized through higher work. As we are exposed to higher frequency, it'll come through and it'll pressurize what's here. And that includes both the positive and the negative. So we will increase our abilities to have these big rhythmic swings between positive and negative, which is why working on the equilibrium is so important. Cultivating the personality of this thing that is us and finding agency, choice, and freedom within that is very, very important, okay? So let's move on now to the work here in step 2 when it comes to the cultivation of the physical of the body. Here we begin with a further exploration of vital breathing and pore breathing. This is where this is introduced. So in the first step, a lot of this was looked at in terms of the breathing as the intention, moving through the breathing apparatus, the nose, through the lungs, and in through the body. And this is a wonderful way to really get to know the body. As we permeate the body more fully, then we begin to look at pore breathing. And so we look at the vital field around us, and we start looking at breathing that energy in through the environment, through the skin, have it permeate through the depths of the body, the mind, the astral nature, and back out. With each breath, building a relationship with the life force, this vital energy. Now, once this is comfortable, you can also do this, as he mentions here, breathing in vitally what you do want and exhaling what the negative, essentially, of that particular intention, right? So in the positive, out the negative, and you can continue building your pore breathing type skills in this way. That being said, I find that this type of work, once again, can really detract from our potential in the absence of developing the actual feeling of energy you're working with. So working with energy, building energy, some basic Qi Gong can be incredibly valuable here to really build the life force that you generate in your body and start to experience that as it moves through the environment around you, in and out. Then from that point, working with the types of intentions you might want to employ. I find the value in this is far more extensive. It's very easy, if we work intellectually first, to delude ourselves, right? If we want the power, the potency of what we're doing in this step to really begin to build your relationship with the energy. So most good systems, including the one that I have on my website, we spend the first chunk of the training really building this ability to feel energy, to saturate the body with energy in different ways, and then to pore breathe this energy in and out through the field. And then the energy strength training side of things to really connect the body in relation to energy, and you'll really start to feel the connection of this. Instead of using a contractive nature of the imagination, you build in the quality. And then the use of the imagination, instead of trying to force the experience, can be to create these little tweaks and release these intentions, these positive intentions, into the energy. So that would be my suggestion with the first part of this mental training aspect of it, or physical training at this stage, aspect of step 2. The next exercise is very, very important. And this is the cultivation of your ability to hold an asana or a meditation posture. So the value in the beginning of lying down and doing this in just a lounging, comfortable position is that we can focus on the actual qualities of the mental work and the focus, which is what we were discussing in step 1. Now here we need to develop the ability to hold a meditation posture or an asana. The one suggested in this book is the Egyptian, sometimes referred to as the Egyptian seated posture. It's done in a chair. Your feet are together, your knees are together. I have a video somewhere on the YouTube channel where I discuss this one in more detail and ways in which you can alter the tissue to make it a little more easy to work with that. Now, if that one's difficult, there's many others. You can do many of the Buddhistic or yogic type of poses. They can all be used as meditation postures. The key here is that you develop an ability to hold this posture comfortably, whatever it might be, and that the spine is straight and we are holding ourselves up. We're not leaning back. Right? We need to be holding ourselves up so that any changes, any energy that we're reticulating through can actually alter the makeup of us in relation to our wakeful state, our relationship with gravity when we're moving around and engaging in the world. Right? The balance will change, the subtleties of balance, of posture, of emotional balance and mental perspective and work in relation to balance, and all this stuff will change. So we need that liveness of the posture. The spine's an antenna. And for many of us in the beginning, when we choose a meditation posture to sit in, it can be vilely uncomfortable. The body revolts, the nervous system revolts, the emotions revolt, the mind revolts to this attempted stillness of the body in an upright position. So part of this is developing a comfort in what we're doing. So even if you're going to do, let's say, some type of triathlon, I had a friend who was a personal trainer for a long time, and when he had a client who was going to spend 3 hours sitting on a bike for a race, part of what they did wasn't even conditioning for the lungs or the athletic capacity. It was just getting used to sitting on a bike seat for 3 hours so that it wasn't an affront to the nervous system. So start with something that is manageable if we're working on our meditation postures. Whatever position you choose, make sure it's one you can attain without injuring yourself, right? So if it's one that requires flexibility, build your flexibility, build your ability to hold that posture safely before you start meditating for long periods of time in that position, right? We don't want to break ourselves. So once you've chosen a posture or worked your way into one, and let's talk a little bit about this, choose a posture that you can start meditating in comfortably now. Also, if you have the desire to work on postures that require more advanced flexibility and mobility, maybe the full lotus is something that appeals to your mind, or the half lotus, there's many different asanas you can choose from. Start building into your stretching routines and your mobility routines stuff that will work you into the ability to do that more advanced position when it comes to the mobility required. But get your meditations happening in an easy position now. Just sitting upright in a chair is sufficient. We want to start now. right? We could spend 5 years, 3 years, whatever it takes to build that mobility in, and suspend the beginning of our actual meditative processes and training until that's happened. But why not do both at the same time? Okay? So we've chosen our position, and now we're sitting in that position. Start with something manageable. Start with what he suggests here is 5 minutes. Don't move. Don't move a muscle. Sit totally still. Through stillness, absolute stillness, this will allow us to begin to perceive all of the pain, all of the discomfort that the mind has in relation to itself, in relation to the emotions, in relation to the body. Absolute stillness is very, very important. It offers so many lessons, so many tools for us to learn with. Okay, start with 5 minutes. Here, setting a timer is very, very easy. And every week, add a minute, add 2 minutes, right? This doesn't need to be eventually an act of will. In the beginning, it might be, which is why we set the timer. Eventually, you set the timer because you have shit to do during your day and you can't just sit there all day. But you want to build up the ability to sit with absolute comfort in your asana, in your meditation posture, for at least an hour, which is what he suggests here. This progresses into 2 hours, 3 hours, 4, 5, 6, 7. Eventually, the time becomes more or less irrelevant. But build it up to at least an hour to start, just sitting there comfortably, right? Before you even begin working any of the mental training or the pore breathing with this or the sensory training in terms of training of the sense gates and visualization and the arising and cessation of those workings of those sense gates, all of the exercises can be done in this meditation posture. One of the big values is that you cannot fall asleep or you pass out. And you develop through this posture the ability to maintain wakeful consciousness in deeper and deeper and deeper states of surrender and release, which the deeper you go, the more valuable that becomes in the sense of not falling asleep, because those states, you go into states that are of deep, deep sleep and rest while being wakeful. Okay, so start with 5 minutes and observe the horrendous torrential pain that starts arising. And underneath this is, you can almost look at this as a type of trial that you have to go through to penetrate to deeper layers of the present moment. You have to go through these trials, these fires of our own illusions. And as we penetrate these illusions of the mind that keep us from the present moment, these barriers of emotion that keep us from the present moment, these barriers of the physicality, these movements of the nervous system, all this stuff, it all keeps us from penetrating deeper into the present moment. So we have to start encountering that barrier. In some Buddhistic meditation, they refer to this as the a flash of fire, the fires in the pan, so to speak, the flash of fire in the pan, the first 10 minutes or so of meditation where there's this revolt and where we are penetrating through a bunch of these habitual movements of mind, emotion, and body into a deeper layer of stillness. What you will start noticing is that you reach a layer of stillness and you go, oh, this is nice. And then you start finding that within that stillness, there's actually a whole other plethora, a whole layer of movement of mind, movement of emotion, movement of body. And then you go deeper into stillness. And then you uncover more movements of mind, more movements of emotion, more movements of body. And the growth process keeps proceeding in this way as the awareness builds. A common tendency is to reach this new awareness of say stillness and go, oh, I'm doing pretty good. Then you penetrate deeper and you uncover all of this movement and we go, oh, no, I've gotten worse. I mean, maybe, but maybe you've gotten better, right? Your awareness has now caught up with your skill of stillness and allowed you to perceive all the movement that's taking place in that. The value of this particular method of meditation is unspeakable. There's so much here. And it's one of the things that many people who engage in this type of work don't do because it's hard. Okay? So we really want to do this. And then it will become easy to sit comfortably for an hour plus at a time. And then you can begin working on the mental training. You could do this at the beginning, one-pointedness of focus. Anything that draws you out of that, you come back to your meditation posture. Essentially, the adherence to stillness of the meditation posture, that becomes the object of your meditation. And then the relinquishment of all of the clingings that interfere with that, right? This essentially gives us perspective and a reference point. And it allows us to see, as we become more still, all of the movement that's occurring around that reference point. Or, try this one on for size. This one's a bit of a mindfuck. All that movement, all that static, that movement, maybe that is actually something that is still, that is in contrast to the pure equanimity, we might say, of the identification with greater consciousness. So this gets into some fun explorations, and you can explore and enjoy that. So work the asana. This cannot be overstated how important this is. This eventually can be done standing, and it can be done, walking. But for the deep, deep work, it's always easier to minimize the distraction or the complexity of what we're doing. Okay, now we could say, okay, lying meditation, lying down, is less complex than sitting up. We don't have to work our balance. Absolutely. However, it is also very, very easy to fall asleep. And there is, very little that we can accomplish when it comes to this process if we are not conscious. Right? So work your meditation posture. Do this a lot. Become very aware of the body and the discomforts of mind, of emotion, of body that arise under the initial, what we might call, trauma of stillness. Okay, the trauma of quiet. So much is here. You will, over time, find that this is a wonderful way to, your black and white mirror, your personality traits, all this stuff will start bubbling out of doing this, and you'll develop a lot at all levels through working on this particular method of sitting in stillness with your meditation posture. Okay, so that concludes the Step 2 overview, this walkthrough of Franz Bardon's Initiation into Hermetics. Once again, a really great book. I hope this is helpful in your exploration of this stuff, and good for the perspective in terms of looking at things in different ways and not getting too rigidly attached to this particular text. It is some wonderful methods, so enjoy it for that. If you're interested in training with me, please check out the website, which will be in the description. I have courses in Tai Chi and also in Qi Gong and Hermetic, Alchemy, this meditative process, some of which is very much attuned to the Franz Bardon text. Also, depending on when you're watching this, I have live retreats that I host. The most recent, the one that's coming up, I should say, is in June 2025. This is a level 1 and 2 retreat. It is 16 days, and we go into a lot of depth through transmission. I take you into some very deep, deep states of meditative work. We explore Akasha, we explore light in a lot of depth. And in the level 2, we'll be looking at some of the invocational work in actually the second book has some of that in it, as well as some planetary and spheric magic and further explorations of this fun, crazy meditative path. All right, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed this. Bye.